The Nevada Air Force Base shimmered under the desert sun, its runways stretching like ribbons across the barren landscape. It was day one of Falcon Edge 2040, the most prestigious air combat simulation in the Western Hemisphere. F-16 fighting Falcons would face off against French Rafale jets in a high-stakes digital dogfight that would determine next year's NATO combat protocols. Claire Dawson pulled her rental car into the visitor's parking lot, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she watched sleek fighter jets taxi in the distance. At 33, she looked more like a graduate student than a defense contractor faded denim jacket over a simple white t-shirt, worn sneakers and hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her only concession to military protocol was the visitor's badge hanging from a lanyard around her neck. She grabbed her weathered laptop bag from the passenger seat, the same battered Samsonite she'd carried through MIT and 3 years at Langley Labs. Inside, nestled between spare cables and energy bars, was her life's work. Phantom Lock, an AI-assisted algorithm that could predict radar blind spots with surgical precision. The Pentagon had contracted her small consulting firm for technical support during the exercises, though nobody had bothered to explain what that actually meant. The guard station was her first hint of trouble. The young airman barely glanced at her credentials before pointing toward a cluster of temporary buildings. "Tech support is in Hangar 7, he said dismissively. "Follow the yellow line." Claire nodded and started walking, her laptop bag bouncing against her hip. Around her, the base buzzed with activity. Pilots in olive flight suits strutted between buildings, their voices carrying across the tarmac with military precision. Ground crews swarmed around the aircraft like worker bees, each movement choreographed by years of training. She felt the stares as she walked. A woman in civilian clothes was unusual enough on a combat base, but one carrying a laptop instead of tools raised eyebrows. Conversations paused as she passed, then resumed in hushed tones behind her. Hangar 7 turned out to be a converted maintenance facility, its interior divided into sections by metal barriers and thick cables. The main command center occupied the far end, a glass-walled room filled with glowing screens and officers in crisp uniforms. Claire could see them through the transparent walls, their heads bent over tactical displays, voices sharp with authority. She approached the entrance, but a stocky colonel with a buzz cut and weathered face stepped into her path. His name tag read Hargrove in block letters. "You the civilian contractor?" His voice carried the gravelly tone of someone who'd spent decades shouting over jet engines. "Claire Dawson? Yes, sir. I'm here to provide technical support for." "Right." He cut her off with a wave. "Tech support sets up in the auxiliary section. Follow Sergeant Martinez there." He gestured toward a younger man in fatigues who was organizing equipment near a bank of servers. Claire felt her cheeks flush but kept her voice steady. "Actually, sir, my contract specifies integration with the primary radar systems. I'll need access to ma'am." Hargrove's tone sharpened. "This is a combat simulation, not a college computer lab. The command center is for real tacticians, not academic experiments." The words hit like a slap. Around them, other officers had stopped, their conversations, their attention drawn by the exchange. Claire caught glimpses of amused smirks, raised eyebrows, the subtle body language of people watching someone get put in their place. A lanky F-16 pilot leaned back in his chair nearby, his flight suit unzipped to the waist. "Let her set." "Up by the fuel diagnostics," he called out with a grin. "This is where we plan real combat missions, not debug Python code." Laughter rippled through the group. Claire's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that arguing with institutional prejudice was like trying to outrun a missile. It only made the impact worse. "Understood, sir," she said quietly. "I'll work from auxiliary." Hargrove nodded curtly and turned away, already dismissing her from his attention. The pilot, his name tag read, Reed was still chuckling as he turned back to his screens. Sergeant Martinez, clearly uncomfortable with the exchange, led her to a corner of the hangar where spare equipment was stored. Metal shelving units created a maze of narrow aisles, and the air smelled of motor oil and electronic components. "Sorry about that, Mom," Martinez said in a low voice. "The Colonel has been running combat sims for 20 years. He's traditional." Claire managed to smile. "No problem, Sergeant. This will work fine." But as Martinez walked away, she felt the familiar ache of professional rejection. She'd faced it at MIT, where professors questioned whether a woman could understand advanced algorithms. She'd encountered it at Langley, where senior researchers dismissed her innovations as interesting but impractical. And now, at the moment when her work could finally prove itself, she was being relegated to a storage room. She found a relatively clear space between two server racks and set up her laptop on a makeshift desk, a piece of plywood balanced on two metal crates. The screen's glow illuminated her face as she opened her development environment, lines of code flowing across the display like a digital waterfall. Phantom Lock had been 3 years in the making, born from her frustration with conventional radar systems. While traditional arrays could track known signatures, her algorithm could predict where aircraft would be invisible, the gaps between coverage zones, the millisecond delays in sensor handoffs, the quantum uncertainties that created windows of opportunity. The military had tested it twice at Langley, both times with promising results. But promising wasn't enough for Colonel Hargrove and his team. They wanted proven systems, battle-tested hardware, technologies with decades of combat history. Claire opened a secure connection to the base's network and began downloading telemetry data from the morning's prep flights. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, muscle memory guiding her through commands she'd executed thousands of times. From her corner, she could hear the command center coming to life. Voices rose and fell in the familiar rhythm of military coordination. Radio chatter crackled from speakers. The main displays flickered as technicians ran system checks. Falcon 1, this is Control. Radio check. Control Falcon 1. Lima Charlie. Rafael Alpha, confirm your position. Rafael Alpha, coordinates. Locked. The simulation would begin in 30 minutes. Claire pulled up her algorithm's interface and began running preliminary calculations. Even without access to the primary radar feeds, she could work with the auxiliary data streams less precise, but enough to test her assumptions. Her phone buzzed with a text message. The caller ID made her smile. David, home. How's the top? Gun experience? Showed them your magic yet? She typed back quickly, still setting up. Might be a long day. Remember what I told you. You're the smartest person in that room. Don't let them forget it. Claire smiled despite herself. David understood the military world better than most his own work in defense technology had taught him how institutions could overlook innovation in favor of tradition. His faith in her abilities sustained her through 3 years of development hell. A burst of laughter from the command center drew her attention. Through the glass walls, she could see Captain Reed gesturing dramatically, his hands miming aircraft maneuvers. The other pilots were gathered around him, their faces animated with anticipation. Double quotes, ... and when the Rafael tries that notching maneuver, Reed was saying, his voice carrying across the hangar, we'll be ready. Their pilots think they're hot stuff, but American engineering beats European fancy every time. More laughter. Claire turned back to her screen, her jaw set with determination. She had 25 minutes to prepare, 25 minutes to prove that her academic experiment could outperform 20 years of military tradition. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, code streaming across the display. Phantom Lock hummed. to life, its neural networks awakening like a digital predator opening its eyes. In the depths of her algorithm, patterns began to emerge, subtle signatures in the electromagnetic spectrum, quantum fluctuations in radar returns, the mathematical poetry of aerospace warfare. Claire didn't need a seat in the command center. She didn't need Colonel Hargrove's approval or Captain Reed's respect. She just needed 30 seconds of access to the primary radar feed, 30 seconds to show them what she could do. The countdown began. All stations. Simulation commences in T-minus 10 minutes. Claire saved her work and closed her laptop. Whatever happened next, she was ready. The room full of career officers might not know her name yet, but they were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent was the one they never saw coming. Outside, the desert wind carried the sound of jet engines spinning up, the mechanical roar of modern warfare preparing to dance its deadly ballet across the digital sky. The simulation launched at exactly 0900 hours. Claire watched from her corner as the command center erupted into controlled chaos officers. Barking coordinates, technicians monitoring data streams. The giant wall displays painting a digital battlefield across the Nevada sky. She had managed to tap into a secondary data feed, a maintenance channel that carried diagnostic information from the radar arrays. It wasn't the full picture, but her algorithm could work with fragments, building patterns from incomplete data. Like an archaeologist reconstructing pottery from shards. Falcon flight, you are cleared for engagement. Colonel Hargrove's voice boomed across the hangar. Show these French pilots how Americans fight. On the main display, blue triangles, representing the F-16s, moved across a grid map of the training airspace. Red triangles marked the Rafales, their positions updating in real time as both sides maneuvered for advantage. Claire's laptop screen told a different story. Phantom Lock had been analyzing the Rafales' flight patterns for the past hour, learning their signatures, mapping their behavioral algorithms. What she saw made her pulse quicken. The French pilots were using a technique called notching, a series of precise turns designed to exploit gaps in radar coverage. But they weren't just flying random patterns. Her algorithm had detected a subtle mathematical sequence, a digital fingerprint that suggested their own I was guiding the maneuvers. She opened a secure messaging channel to the F-16 flight leader. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then she typed, Falcon 1, recommend vector 270, altitude 15,000. Rafales using predictive notching pattern. She hit send and waited. Nothing happened. The blue triangles on the main display continued their programmed flight path, apparently oblivious to her warning. Claire checked her connection. The message had been delivered, but there was no response. In the command center, Captain Reed was leaning back in his chair, supremely confident. They're running scared already, he announced. Watch this Falcon 2. Execute hammer fall on my mark. The F-16s dove toward their targets, missile lock indicators flashing on the displays. For a moment, it looked like a perfect setup. Then the red triangles scattered like startled birds, each Rafale sliding into a different radar shadow. What the hell? Reed sat forward, his hands flying over his controls. Where did they go? Lost contact, reported the technician. All 4 Rafales have dropped off scope. The room fell silent, except for the hum of electronics and the distant roar of actual jets overhead. On the display, the blue triangles circled. Helplessly, their targeting computers searching empty sky. Claire's screen told the whole story. Phantom Lock had tracked the Rafales through their evasion sequence, predicting their next positions based on the mathematical pattern she'd identified. They were still there, invisible to conventional radar, but clear as daylight to her algorithm. She typed another message. Falcon flight. Targets at grid reference 245.7 by 89.3. Altitude 12,500 and descending. Engagement window in 15 seconds. This time, someone responded. Lieutenant Jake Daniels, Falcon 2's pilot, had been monitoring the technical channels. His reply was brief. Source? Claire hesitated. Revealing herself meant taking responsibility, putting her reputation on the line. But the alternative was watching American pilots get shot down by an opponent they couldn't see. She typed, Phantom Lock Predictive Algorithm. Trust me. A pause. Then, copy that. Adjusting heading. On the main display, one blue triangle broke. Formation, banking toward the coordinates Claire had provided. The command center erupted in confusion. Falcon 2, what's your status? Hargrove demanded. Sir, I'm tracking a possible contact. Daniel's voice crackled over the radio. Moving to investigate. There's nothing on scope, Lieutenant. But Daniels was already lining up his shot. On Claire's screen, the convergence was perfect. The Rafael's predicted position intersecting with the F-16's flight path in a textbook intercept. She held her breath as the distance closed. Fox 3. Daniels called out, announcing his simulated missile launch. The main display flashed. One red triangle appeared suddenly, caught in the open by Daniels' virtual AMRAAM. The kill was confirmed. Instantly, Rafael 2 is down, announced the simulation controller. Scored hit to Falcon 2. The command center fell silent. Every eye was on the display, trying to understand how Daniels had found a target that didn't exist on their screens. Captain Reed was the first to speak. Lucky guess, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Colonel Hargrove was studying, his console with a frown. Daniels, explain your targeting solution. Sir, I received targeting data through the technical channel. Coordinates were accurate. From who? Claire felt every eye in the hangar turn toward the technical section. Her corner was partially hidden by equipment racks, but she could feel the attention like heat from a spotlight. A young technician named Marcus Torres raised his hand nervously. Sir, there's been some unofficial analysis running on the auxiliary systems. Unofficial analysis? Hargrove's voice could have cut steel. Torres glanced toward Claire's position. The contractor, sir. She's been tracking the exercise through the maintenance feeds. The silence stretched out like a taut wire. Claire saved her work and stood up, her laptop under one arm. She walked slowly toward the command center, her sneakers quiet on the concrete floor. You're telling me, Hargrove said, his voice dangerously calm, that a civilian contractor, working with secondary data feeds, predicted a target position that our primary radar couldn't track? Claire stopped just outside the command center's entrance. Yes, sir. That's correct. Reed spun in his chair to face her. Lady, that was pure luck. You can't predict aircraft behavior with some homemade algorithm. It's not homemade, Claire replied evenly. It's 3 years of research into predictive radar tracking, field-tested at Langley Labs and validated by MIT's aerospace department. Academic theory, Reed scoffed. This is real combat simulation. Real combat simulation that just scored a kill based on my academic theory. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Other officers were exchanging glances, unsure how to process what they'd just witnessed. A civilian had outperformed their $1 million radar systems using a laptop and an internet connection. Major Lisa Garrett, the deputy commander, leaned forward in her chair. Ms. Dawson, how confident are you in your algorithm's predictions? Claire met her gaze steadily. Confident enough to stake my reputation on them, ma'am. Garrett nodded slowly. Colonel, I recommend we integrate Ms. Dawson's system into the next engagement. See if this was really luck or if we're missing something important. Hargrove's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. Around the room, she could sense the shift in atmosphere, curiosity replacing dismissal. Professional interest overriding personal prejudice. Fine, he said finally. Ms. Dawson, you have access to auxiliary displays for the next round. But if this is some kind of fluke, you're done here. Claire nodded. Understood, sir. As she walked toward an open workstation, she caught Captain Reed's expression. Then, easy confidence was gone, replaced by something harder to read, wariness, perhaps, or the first stirring of professional respect. Lieutenant Daniels' voice crackled over the radio. Control, Falcon 2, requesting permission to maintain current hunting pattern. I think our technical support might be onto something. Claire plugged her laptop into the auxiliary display system and began uploading her tracking data. On the screen, her algorithm's predictions painted a three-dimensional map of the battlespace, showing not just where the aircraft were, but where they would be. The second engagement was about to begin, and this time she would be ready. But, even as she prepared for the next round, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that her success had made her more enemies than allies. The military didn't like surprises, and she had just become the biggest surprise in the exercise. The real fight, she realized, wasn't between F-16s and Rafales. It was between innovation and tradition, between the future and the past. And she was about to find out which side would win. The break between engagements lasted 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. Claire remained at her borrowed workstation, fine-tuning Phantom Lock's parameters while the command center buzzed with nervous energy around her. She could feel the eyes on her, measuring, evaluating, waiting for her to fail. The pilot's lounge was adjacent to the command center, separated by a large window that offered a clear view of both spaces. Claire tried to ignore the conversations happening on the other side of the glass, but Captain Reed's voice carried clearly. Mark my words, he was saying to a group of younger pilots, this is all smoke and mirrors. Some fancy computer model doesn't replace 20 years of combat experience. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, one of the newer F-16 pilots, leaned forward with interest. But sir, the targeting solution was perfect. Daniels nailed that refail exactly where her algorithm predicted. Daniels got lucky, Reed snapped. He followed bogus coordinates and happened to stumble into a target. Don't start believing in magic just because some civilian waves a laptop around. Claire's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes on her screen. The targeting solution hadn't been luck. It had been mathematics, pure and simple. Her algorithm had calculated the refail's most probable position based on its previous behavior patterns, and the prediction had been accurate to within 50 meters. A shadow fell across her workstation. She looked up to see Major Garrett standing nearby, her expression unreadable. Ms. Dawson, I need to ask you something, Garrett said quietly. Are you recording any of this exercise data? Claire frowned. Only the telemetry feeds I'm authorized to access, ma'am. Everything's in accordance with my contract. I'm not questioning your authorization. I'm asking about your storage protocols. Are you keeping local copies of the radar data? Some cached files, yes. Phantom Lock needs historical data to build its predictive models. Garrett nodded slowly. I need you to transfer those files to our secure server. Colonel Hargrove's orders. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. Ma'am, those files contain proprietary algorithms. My company has intellectual property rights, Ms. Dawson. Garrett's voice carried the weight of military authority. This is a classified exercise. All data generated during these simulations belongs to the United States Air Force. I'm sure you understand the security implications. It was a trap, Claire realized. By demanding her cached files, they were effectively confiscating 3 years of research and development. Phantom Lock's core algorithms would be exposed, analyzed, and potentially reverse-engineered without any compensation to her company. But refusing would mean immediate termination of her contract and possible legal action for violating security protocols. She was caught between protecting her life's work and maintaining her credibility with the military. "I understand, ma'am," she said carefully, "but I'll need to redact the proprietary elements before transfer. That's standard practice for contractor-owned technology." Garrett's expression hardened. "There's no time for redaction. The next engagement begins in 15 minutes. Either you transfer the files now, or you're removed from the exercise." Claire's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her laptop. This was exactly the kind of institutional pressure she'd feared. The military's tendency to appropriate civilian technology without compensation. She had two choices: comply and lose her intellectual property, or resist and lose her chance to prove Phantom Lock's value. "Ma'am, I need to make a phone call," she said. "My company's legal department. No outside communications during active exercises." Garrett cut her off. "That's a hard rule, Ms. Dawson. You know this." The trap was complete. Claire looked around the command center, searching for an ally, but found only calculating stares. Even Lieutenant Daniels, who had benefited from her targeting data, was focused on his own preparations. "I'll need a few minutes to prepare the files," she said finally. Garrett nodded. 5 minutes, then we proceed with or without you." As the major walked away, Claire's mind raced. She couldn't afford to lose her research, but she also couldn't afford to be excluded from the exercise. Her company's future depended on proving Phantom Lock's effectiveness in real combat scenarios. She opened her laptop's file management system and began creating a sanitized version of her data cache. The process required deleting the core algorithmic functions while preserving the basic tracking data, essentially lobotomizing her own creation to protect its intellectual property. But as she worked, a new plan began to form. If they wanted her raw data, she'd give them exactly that: raw, unprocessed telemetry feeds without the analytical framework that made them useful. It would satisfy their security requirements while preserving her competitive advantage. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, creating a dummy dataset that looked comprehensive but lacked the essential pattern recognition algorithms. To a casual observer, it would appear to be complete radar analysis software. But without the neural network that powered Phantom Lock's predictions, it would be useless. "Time's up," Garrett announced. Claire ejected a USB drive and handed it. "Over. Complete data transfer, ma'am. Everything from my cache." Garrett plugged the drive into a secure terminal and began the upload process. As the files transferred, Claire caught Captain Reed watching the procedure with obvious satisfaction. He thought he was witnessing her defeat, the moment when military bureaucracy crushed civilian innovation. He had no idea that the files he was watching were worthless. "Upload complete," Garrett announced. "Ms. Dawson, you're cleared for the next engagement. Your workstation access has been restored." Claire nodded and began reconnecting her laptop to the auxiliary systems. But as she worked, she noticed something troubling. The network connection was slower than before, and several data feeds that had been available earlier were now restricted. She ran a quick diagnostic and found the problem. Her workstation had been relegated to a lower security tier, limiting her access to real-time radar data. The feeds she was receiving were delayed by nearly 30 seconds, an eternity in air combat. It was subtle sabotage, designed to look like a routine security adjustment while effectively crippling her ability to provide accurate targeting data. Someone had decided that her first success was a fluke, and they were determined to ensure she didn't repeat it. Claire glanced toward the command center, where Colonel Hargrove was reviewing the next engagement parameters. Their eyes met for a moment, and she saw the challenge in his expression. He was testing her, seeing if she could perform under deliberately adverse conditions. "Fine," she thought. If they wanted to play games, she'd show them exactly what she could do with limited resources. She began modifying Phantom Lock's algorithms, adjusting for the data delay and compensating for the reduced sensor access. It was like trying to hit a moving target while blindfolded, but she'd faced worse challenges during her graduate work. All stations, Engagement 2 begins in T-2 minutes, the controller announced. Claire saved her modifications and leaned back in her chair. The next few minutes would determine whether she was a one-hit wonder or a genuine threat to the established order. Either way, she was about to find out if her algorithm could overcome not just enemy aircraft, but her own side's attempts to undermine her. The war between innovation and tradition was about to enter its next phase, and Claire Dawson was determined to win. Engagement 2 launched with Claire working under deliberately crippled conditions. The 30-second delay in her data feeds meant she was essentially trying to predict the future while looking at the past, a merely impossible task that would have defeated conventional tracking systems. But Phantom Lock wasn't conventional. Claire had spent the break rebuilding her algorithm's core functions, creating a predictive model that could extrapolate current positions from delayed data. It was like solving a differential equation in real time using mathematical chaos theory to find order in apparent randomness. The F-16s took off in standard formation, their blue triangles appearing on the main display as they climbed to engagement altitude. The Rafales were already airborne, their red triangles dancing across the digital battlefield in patterns that seemed random to conventional analysis. Claire's screen told a different story. Even with the data delay, Phantom Lock was beginning to recognize signatures, not just where the aircraft had been, but where they were going. The French pilots were using the same eye-assisted evasion patterns, but they'd modified the parameters slightly, hoping to throw off any tracking systems that might have learned their previous behavior. They hadn't counted on Claire's adaptive algorithms. Falcon flight, you are cleared for engagement, Colonel Hargrove announced. Execute according to brief parameters. The F-16s dove toward their targets, but the Rafales were ready. As soon as the American fighters committed to their attack vectors, the French aircraft scattered into another notching sequence, disappearing from conventional radar. Contact lost, reported the radar operator. All Rafales have gone dark. In the command center, Captain Reed leaned forward with satisfaction. Just like last time. They'll hide until our fuel gets low, then hit us when we're vulnerable. But Claire was already working. Her algorithm had traced the Rafale's evasion pattern and was projecting their next positions. The mathematical model showed them moving into a complex orbital pattern, using terrain masking and electronic countermeasures to stay invisible. She opened the tactical channel and began transmitting coordinates. Falcon flight. Recommended vectors follows. Falcon 1, heading 285, altitude 18,000. Falcon 2, heading 310, altitude 16,500. Lieutenant Daniels responded immediately. Copy that. Phantom Lock, adjusting course. But the other pilots hesitated. Claire could hear the uncertainty in their radio chatter as they waited for official confirmation from the command center. They trusted her first success, but military doctrine demanded clear chains of command. Falcon 3, are you copying the vector changes? Daniels asked. Negative, Falcon 2. Maintaining brief parameters until control confirms. Colonel Hargrove's voice cut through the radio traffic. All Falcon units maintain assigned vectors. Do not deviate from flight plan. Claire felt her stomach drop. Hargrove was deliberately countermanding her guidance, forcing the F-16s to fly blind while the Rafales maneuvered for advantage. It was sabotage disguised as command authority. She watched her screen as the predicted engagement developed. The Rafales were completing their orbital maneuver, positioning themselves for a classic pincer attack. In 90 seconds, they would emerged from their electronic shadows simultaneously, catching the F-16s in a crossfire. She opened a direct channel to Lieutenant Daniels. "Jake, trust me. Break formation now and climb to 20,000 feet. You have 60 seconds before they spring the trap." The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Daniels' voice, calm and professional. "Control, Falcon 2 has a mechanical issue. Climbing to safe altitude for diagnostic." It was a clever lie, giving him authorization to follow Claire's guidance without directly disobeying orders. She smiled despite the tension as she watched his blue triangle peel away from the formation. "Falcon 2, what's your status?" Hargrove demanded. "Sir, running diagnostics. Recommend Falcon flight, maintain defensive posture." But it was too late for the others. Right on schedule, the Rafales materialized from their hiding spots, appearing simultaneously above and below the remaining F-16s. The attack was perfectly coordinated, a textbook example of digital air combat. Multiple contacts. The radar operator shouted. "Rafales at bearing 45 and 190, closing fast." The command center erupted into chaos as the F-16 pilots tried to respond to the sudden threat. But they were caught in the open, their defensive options limited by their predictable flight. "Paths. Fox 3, came the call from Rafale Alpha. "Fox 3, echoed Rafale Bravo. Two more blue triangles flashed and disappeared from the display. Falcon 3 and Falcon 4 had been eliminated in a matter of seconds. But Daniels was ready. Following Claire's coordinates, he had positioned himself perfectly for a counterattack. As the Rafales completed their strike, he dove from above. His targeting systems locked onto the lead French fighter. "Falcon 2, Fox 3. The simulated missile found its mark." Rafale flashed and vanished from the display. The engagement continued for another 3 minutes, but the outcome was decided. Daniels, guided by Claire's predictions, managed to down one more Rafale before the exercise concluded. The final score, France 2, United States 2. A draw, but it felt like a victory. As the pilots began their post-flight debriefs, Claire sat back in her chair and closed her laptop. She had proven that Phantom Lock could work even under adverse conditions, but the cost had been high. 2 American pilots had been shot down because command authority had overruled tactical intelligence. Major Garrett approached her workstation, her expression thoughtful. "Ms. Dawson, that was impressive work. Your targeting solutions were accurate within parameters." "Thank you, ma'am." "However," Garrett continued, "there are concerns about your methods. Some officers feel that unofficial guidance creates confusion in the tactical environment." Claire looked up sharply. "Ma'am, my guidance prevented a complete sweep. Without those vector changes, all 4 F-16s would have been eliminated." "That's speculation. We can't know what would have happened if everyone had followed the flight plan." It was maddening logic punishing her for success while ignoring the failures of conventional tactics. Claire could feel her professional composure beginning to crack. "Ma'am, with respect, the mathematical models are clear. The Rafales were using predictive algorithms of their own. Standard evasion patterns won't work against AI-assisted opponents." Garrett nodded slowly. "Which brings us to the real issue. Your algorithm appears to be more sophisticated than you initially indicated. Some people are concerned about the implications." "What implications?" "If a civilian contractor can outperform military radar systems, what does that say about our current capabilities? There are questions about whether your technology represents a security risk." Claire felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. They weren't questioning her results. They were questioning her loyalty. The success of Phantom Lock had made her a threat to institutional pride, and now they were looking for reasons to eliminate that threat. "Ma'am, I'm an American citizen, working under a valid contract. My security clearance was approved at the highest levels." "Of course. But security protocols evolve, Ms. Dawson. What was acceptable yesterday might not be acceptable tomorrow. The warning was clear. Claire had proven her technology could work, but that success had made her dangerous to people who preferred predictable failures to unpredictable victories. As Garrett walked away, Claire realized that her fight wasn't just about proving Phantom Lock's capabilities. It was about survival in a system that rewarded conformity and punished innovation. The next engagement would be more than a test of her algorithm. It would be a battle for her professional life. The break between engagements stretched into an hour, then two. Claire remained at her workstation, ostensibly preparing for the next simulation, but she could feel the change in atmosphere around her. Conversation stopped when she walked by. Officers clustered in small groups, their voices dropping to whispers whenever she approached. Something was happening behind the scenes. The first sign of trouble came when Technical Sergeant Marcus Torres approached her desk, his face pale with anxiety. He glanced around nervously before leaning close. "Ma'am, you need to know something," he whispered. "They're running a security audit on your system access." Colonel Hargrove called in the intelligence officers. Claire's blood ran cold. "What kind of audit?" "Full data forensics. They're checking every file you accessed, every message you sent, every algorithm you ran. They're saying there might be unauthorized data collection." The implications hit her like a physical blow. A security investigation could destroy her career, her company, her entire future in defense contracting. Even if she was eventually cleared, the mere existence of an investigation would mark her as a potential security risk. "Torres, I've done nothing wrong. Everything I accessed was within my contract parameters." "I know that, ma'am. But they're not looking for actual violations. They're looking for technicalities, ways to justify removing you from the exercise." Claire's mind raced. The confiscated files, the network restrictions, the deliberate sabotage of her data feeds. It was all part of a coordinated effort to eliminate her influence. But why? What threat did she represent that justified such extreme measures? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Rebecca Chun, a civilian analyst from the Pentagon's Advanced Technology Office, appeared at Claire's workstation carrying a thick folder marked with classification stamps. "Ms. Dawson, we need to talk." Claire looked up warily. "About what, Dr. Chun?" "About the implications of your algorithm for national security." Chun pulled up a chair and sat down, her expression serious. "Your Phantom Lock system has demonstrated capabilities that exceed our current threat assessments. I don't understand." Chun opened her folder and pulled out a series of technical documents. 3 hours ago, we ran your tracking data through our strategic analysis computers. The results were concerning. She spread out several printouts showing complex medical models and threat projections. Claire recognized some of the equations. They were derivatives of her own algorithms, but expanded and weaponized beyond anything she had intended. "Your predictive algorithms don't just work against aircraft," Chun continued. "Our models suggest they could be adapted to track submarines, satellites, even ballistic missiles. In the wrong hands, this technology could neutralize America's stealth capabilities." Claire felt the room spinning around her. "Dr. Chun, I developed this system to help American forces. I would never. I'm not questioning your loyalty, Ms. Dawson. I'm questioning your security protocols. How many people have access to your source code? How many foreign nationals work for your company? How secure are your development servers?" The questions came like hammer blows. Claire's small consulting firm employed 12 people, including 2 naturalized citizens who had emigrated from allied countries. Their servers used standard commercial encryption, not military-grade security. In the academic world, such arrangements were normal. In the defense industry, they were apparently catastrophic vulnerabilities. Dr. Chun, my company operates under all applicable security regulations. We've passed every audit, met every requirement. Regulations written before anyone imagined technology like this, Chun replied. Ms. Dawson, your algorithm represents a paradigm shift in predictive warfare. The existing security framework simply isn't adequate. Claire realized she was caught in a bureaucratic nightmare. Her success had revealed capabilities that the military hadn't anticipated, creating security concerns that existing regulations couldn't address. She was being punished for innovating beyond the system's ability to control her innovation. What are you proposing? She asked quietly. Chun pulled out another document, a thick contract marked with multiple classification levels. Immediate acquisition of your technology by the Department of Defense. Full buyout of your company, with employment guarantees for your staff under appropriate security clearances. It was a polite way of saying nationalization. They wanted to seize her life's work and convert it into a classified military program, effectively ending her career as an independent contractor. And if I refuse? Then this exercise ends immediately. Your security clearance is revoked, and your company is barred from future defense contracts. Chun's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. I'm sorry, Ms. Dawson, but national security takes precedence over business considerations. Claire stared at the contract, her hands trembling slightly. 3 years of research, 12 employees' livelihoods, her entire professional future all held hostage by bureaucratic paranoia. But as she read through the terms, something caught her eye. The acquisition offer was dated 2 days ago, before the exercise had even begun. They had planned this from the start, using the simulation as a pretext to justify seizing her technology. Dr. Chun, this contract predates my demonstration. You decided to nationalize my company before you even knew if Phantom Lock would work. Chun had the grace to look uncomfortable. The decision was based on preliminary assessments of your technology's potential applications. Based on what assessments? I never shared my core algorithms with anyone outside my company. Ms. Dawson, the intelligence community has ways of evaluating emerging technologies. Your research papers, your patent applications, your hiring patterns, they all painted a picture of capabilities that could destabilize existing defense paradigms. The truth hit Claire like a lightning bolt. They hadn't just been monitoring her work. They had been actively planning to appropriate it. The entire exercise was a setup, designed to demonstrate her technology's value while creating justification for its seizure. Her phone buzzed with a text message from David. Haven't heard from you? Everything okay? Claire realized she hadn't contacted her husband in over 6 hours. The communication restrictions had been another layer of isolation, cutting her off from outside support while they maneuvered to corner her. I need to make a phone call, she said, standing up. Ms. Dawson, you know that's not permitted during active exercises. Dr. Chen, if you're nationalizing my company, then I'm no longer a contractor. I'm a civilian being coerced by the federal government, and I have the right to legal counsel. Chun's mask of professional courtesy finally slipped. Ms. Dawson, I strongly advise you not to escalate this situation. There are national security implications that go far beyond your personal interests. And there are constitutional implications that go far beyond your bureaucratic convenience. The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Finally, Chun closed her folder and stood up. You have until the end of business today to sign the acquisition agreement. After that, alternative measures will be implemented. As Chun walked away, Claire sank back into her chair. She had proven that Phantom Lock could revolutionize air combat, but her success had triggered a chain reaction that threatened to destroy everything she had built. The next few hours would determine whether she could find a way to protect her work, her company, and her future. But first, She needed to understand exactly what kind of game they were playing and how she could win it. Claire sat in her rental car outside the base communications center, her phone finally connected to the outside world. Her conversation with David had been brief but illuminating. While she'd been trapped in bureaucratic quicksand, he'd been making calls of his own. They moved too fast. David's voice was tight with controlled anger. Chun's acquisition offer isn't just premature, it's legally questionable. Your contract explicitly protects your intellectual property rights. They're claiming national security override, which requires specific documentation and congressional notification. I've been checking with our contacts at the Pentagon. Nobody filed the proper paperwork for emergency acquisition. Claire felt a surge of hope. So they're bluffing? Partially. They can still revoke your clearance and bar you from future contracts, but they can't seize your company without due process. Chun was trying to intimidate you into voluntary surrender. What do? Fight back. I've already called Senator Patricia Walsh's office. She chairs the Defense Technology Subcommittee. Her staff is very interested in hearing about irregular acquisition procedures. Claire smiled for the first time in hours. Senator Walsh was a former Air Force pilot who had built her political career on reforming defense procurement. If anyone would take on the bureaucracy, it would be her. There's something else, David continued. I did some research on Dr. Chun's office. They've been pushing a classified project called Cognitive Shield, an AI system designed to counter predictive algorithms exactly like Phantom Lock. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. They're not trying to acquire my technology. They're trying to eliminate it. Phantom Lock threatens their own project. Exactly. If your algorithm works better than their multi-billion-dollar program, some very important people are going to look incompetent. Claire felt her anger crystallizing into cold determination. This wasn't about national security. It was about protecting bureaucratic turf and classified budgets. They were trying to destroy her work to cover up their own failures. David, I'm going back in there. I want to finish this exercise and prove that Phantom Lock works better than anything they've got. Claire, be careful. These people play for keeps. So do I. She drove back to the base with renewed purpose. The guards waved her through without question. They hadn't received orders to restrict her movement yet, but she knew that could change at any moment. The command center was buzzing with activity when she returned. The afternoon engagement was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes, and the tactical displays showed a more complex scenario: multiple aircraft, varied altitudes, electronic warfare environments designed to stress test both sides' capabilities. Colonel Hargrove looked up as she entered. Ms. Dawson, I thought you'd left for the day. Just needed some air, sir. Ready to continue the exercise. But something had changed during her absence. Her workstation had been relocated to a different corner of the hangar, farther from the main displays and with limited network access. Her security badge no longer opened certain doors. The isolation was subtle but unmistakable. Technical Sergeant. Torres approached her new position, carrying a tablet loaded with system diagnostics. Ma'am, they've locked down your network access, he whispered. You're restricted to read-only mode on most channels. Claire nodded grimly. They were trying to reduce her to a passive observer, preventing her from providing real-time guidance to the pilots. But they had underestimated her preparation. During her phone call with David, she had uploaded a compressed version of Phantom Lock to a secure cloud server. Now she connected her laptop through her phone's hotspot, bypassing the base network entirely. It wasn't as fast as direct access, but it would work. All stations, Engagement 3 begins in T-5 minutes, the controller announced. This time, the scenario was more challenging. 8 aircraft per side, multiple engagement zones, and active electronic jamming designed to degrade radar performance. It was exactly the kind of complex environment where conventional tracking systems would struggle. Claire watched her laptop screen as Phantom Lock came online, processing data streams from multiple sources. The algorithm had learned from the previous engagements, adapting its models to account for both American and French tactical patterns. The aircraft launched in waves, their icons populating the tactical displays like pieces on a three-dimensional chessboard. Almost immediately, both sides began employing countermeasures jamming systems, chaff dispensers, and stealth protocols designed to confuse enemy sensors. Within minutes, the conventional radar picture began to degrade. Aircraft disappeared from the displays, their positions becoming uncertain as electronic warfare took its toll. In the command center, operators struggled to maintain target tracks while pilots called out confused position reports. But Claire's algorithm was designed for exactly this scenario. Instead of relying on continuous radar contact, Phantom Lock used predictive modeling to fill in the gaps. When an aircraft disappeared from sensors, the system calculated its most probable trajectory and continued tracking its ghost. She opened a secure messaging app and began sending position updates to Lieutenant Daniels. Jake, multiple contacts. Bearing 045, altitude 25,000. Recommend defensive spiral to maintain separation. The response came back immediately. Copy that. Phantom Lock, adjusting formation. But this time, Daniels wasn't alone. Lieutenant Kim and two other F-16 pilots had quietly joined the text channel, receiving Claire's guidance through unofficial channels while maintaining radio silence with the command center. It was a calculated risk. If Hargrove discovered the parallel communication network, he could charge them all with insubordination. But the pilots had seen the results of Claire's predictions, and they trusted her algorithms more than conventional radar. The engagement developed into a complex dance of invisible aircraft, with both sides maneuvering through electronic fog while trying to maintain situational awareness. The French Rafales were using their own AI-assisted tactics, but they were designed to exploit weaknesses in conventional tracking systems. They hadn't anticipated Phantom Lock. Claire watched her screen as the algorithm identified patterns in the electronic chaos. The French aircraft were using a sophisticated jamming rotation, cycling their countermeasures in a sequence designed to create maximum confusion. But the rotation followed a mathematical pattern, and patterns could be predicted. She began transmitting detailed coordinates to her pilot network. Rafale Alpha at grid 247 to 89, heading 180, altitude descending through 20,000, window for engagement in 45 seconds. Lieutenant Kim was the first to respond. Phantom Lock, I don't see anything. On scope at those coordinates. Trust the math, Sarah. He's there. Kim adjusted her heading based on Claire's guidance, flying toward an apparently empty piece of sky. Her targeting radar showed nothing, but she followed the algorithm's predictions with faith born from previous successes. At exactly the moment Claire had predicted, the Rafale emerged from its electronic cloak, caught in the open during a countermeasure transition. Kim was waiting for it. Fox 3. The simulated missile found its mark perfectly. Rafale Alpha was eliminated. In the command center, the successful engagement caused confusion. The main displays had shown no contacts in that sector, yet somehow an F-16 had managed to down an enemy aircraft. How did Falcon 5 acquire that target? Hargrove demanded. Kim's voice came back professionally calm. Sir, I was following a hunch based on tactical analysis. Lucky shot. But Claire could see the skeptical looks exchanged between the command staff. They knew something was happening outside their control, but they couldn't prove what it was. The engagement continued for another 20 minutes, with Claire's pilots systematically dismantling the French formation. By the time the exercise concluded, The score was decisively American. 6 Rafales down, 2 F-16s lost. It was the most lopsided victory in the exercise's history. As the pilots began their post-flight debriefs, Claire quietly packed her laptop and prepared to leave. She had proven Phantom Lock's capabilities beyond any doubt, but she knew the bureaucratic retaliation would be swift and severe. Colonel Hargrove approached her workstation, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Dawson, that was an impressive performance. Almost impossibly impressive. Thank you, sir. So impressive that I have to wonder how it was achieved. Our post-engagement analysis is showing some ... irregularities." Claire met his gaze steadily. "Sir, I provided technical analysis within the scope of my contract. If there are questions about the methods, I'm happy to discuss them with appropriate personnel." "Oh, you will be. Dr. Chen is very interested in how your algorithm achieved such remarkable results while working with degraded data feeds." The threat was clear. They were going to investigate every aspect of her performance, looking for violations they could use to justify her removal. But Claire was no longer afraid. She had allies now, pilots who had seen her work, politicians who understood the implications, and most importantly, documented proof that her technology worked better than anything the military currently possessed. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time since arriving at the base, Claire felt like she might actually win it. The emergency meeting was called for 1800 hours, just as the desert sun began to paint the Nevada sky in shades of amber and gold. Claire arrived at the base conference room to find it packed with personnel she'd never seen before: intelligence officers in civilian clothes, Pentagon analysts with classified briefcases, and a stone-faced woman in a general's uniform who commanded immediate attention. General Margaret Stone was a legend in Air Force circles, a former Thunderbirds pilot who had risen through the ranks to become Director of Strategic Technologies. Her presence meant this situation had escalated far beyond a simple contractor dispute. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Stone began without preamble, "we have a problem. Today's exercise results have raised significant questions about our current technological capabilities." Claire remained silent as Stone activated a wall-mounted display showing the afternoon's engagement statistics. The numbers were stark. American forces had achieved a 75% kill ratio while operating in severely degraded sensor environments. By any historical standard, it was an impossible outcome. "Dr. Chen, please brief us on your analysis." Chen stood and moved to the display, her earlier confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. "General, our post-engagement review indicates that American pilots received targeting data that was significantly more accurate than anything our current systems could provide." "More accurate how?" "They were engaging targets that didn't exist on our radar displays. In some cases, they were attacking empty air and scoring confirmed kills. The only explanation is access to superior tracking algorithms." Stone's gaze shifted to Claire. "Ms. Dawson, I understand you've developed some kind of predictive software. Care to explain how it works?" Claire stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room focus on her. This was the moment she'd been preparing for, the chance to explain not just what Phantom Lock could do, but why it mattered. "General, traditional radar systems work by detecting reflected electromagnetic energy. They can tell you where an aircraft is, but not necessarily where it's going. Phantom Lock uses machine learning to analyze behavioral patterns and predict future positions. That's hardly revolutionary. We've had predictive tracking for decades." "Yes, ma'am, but not adaptive prediction. Most systems extrapolate based on current trajectory. Phantom Lock analyzes historical behavior patterns, identifies decision-making algorithms, and predicts not just movement but tactical choices." She moved to the display and began sketching diagrams with the digital pointer. Modern fighter aircraft use AI-assisted flight systems. Those systems make decisions based on programmed parameters, optimal evasion angles, energy management protocols, threat response matrices. If you understand the programming, you can predict the decisions. General Stone leaned forward with interest. You're saying you reverse-engineered enemy AI systems? Not exactly. I created an algorithm that learns by observation. Give it enough examples of an aircraft's behavior, and it can predict that aircraft's future actions with remarkable accuracy. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Chun was the first to speak, her voice carefully controlled. General, this technology represents a potential threat to our own stealth capabilities. If foreign powers develop similar systems, they already have, Claire interrupted. The Chinese have been working on predictive algorithms for 3 years. The Russians deployed something similar in Syria last year. We're not ahead of the curve, we're behind it. She pulled out her phone and displayed a series of technical papers she'd downloaded during her break. These are published research from Beijing University, Moscow Institute of Technology, and the European Defense Agency. Everyone is working on this technology. The difference is, they're not trying to suppress their own innovations. General, Stone studied the papers with growing concern. Ms. Dawson, are you saying that our adversaries already possess capabilities similar to your algorithm? I'm saying they possess capabilities that make our current countermeasures obsolete. Traditional stealth technology relies on hiding signatures. But if an enemy can predict your behavior patterns, they don't need to see you to target you. The revelation hit the room like a shockwave. For decades, American military superiority had been built on technological advantages, stealth aircraft, advanced radar systems, superior electronic warfare capabilities. The idea that those advantages could be neutralized by predictive algorithms was a strategic nightmare. Colonel Hargrove spoke for the first time since the meeting began. Ma'am, with respect, this sounds like speculation. One successful exercise doesn't prove. Colonel, General Stone cut him off. Today's results weren't speculation. They were demonstration. Ms. Dawson's algorithm achieved targeting solutions that our best systems couldn't match. She turned back to Claire. What would it take to integrate this technology into our operational systems? Claire felt a moment of vertigo. After hours of being treated as a security threat, she was suddenly being asked to revolutionize American air defense. But she had learned to be cautious about military enthusiasm. General, integration would require significant testing and validation. Phantom Lock was designed as a proof of concept, not an operational system. How long for operational deployment? With proper resources and security clearances, 12 to 18 months for initial capability. Dr. Chun stood abruptly. General, I must object. This technology hasn't undergone proper security review. Ms. Dawson's company lacks the clearance levels for classified integration. Then we'll give them the clearances, Stone replied without hesitation. Dr. Chun, your cognitive shield program has been in development for 4 years and has yet to demonstrate operational capability. Ms. Dawson achieved superior results in 3 days with a laptop and an internet connection. The bureaucratic mask finally slipped from Chun's face. General, you don't understand the security implications. I understand them perfectly. We can either adapt to new realities or be defeated by them. Ms. Dawson, you'll be hearing from my office within 24 hours regarding contract modification and security upgrade. As the meeting disbanded, Claire felt a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. She had won the immediate battle, but she understood that the larger war was far from over. Institutional resistance would continue, and there would be attempts to undermine or co-opt her work. But for the first time since arriving at the base, she felt like she was being treated as a professional rather than a threat. The military was finally beginning to understand that innovation required embracing change, not suppressing it. Lieutenant Daniels approached her as she gathered her materials. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you. Your guidance saved lives, today simulated lives. But the lessons are real. Just doing my job, Jake." "No, ma'am, you were doing something more than that. You were showing us the future." As Claire walked out into the Nevada evening, her phone buzzed with a text from David. Saw the news alerts. "Pentagon is calling it a revolutionary advance in predictive combat systems. Sounds like you won." She typed back, "Won this round. The real fight starts tomorrow." But despite her caution, Claire couldn't suppress a smile. She had started the day as an unwanted contractor relegated to a corner with her laptop. She was ending it as the architect of a new paradigm in air combat. The mockery and sabotage had backfired spectacularly. By trying to suppress her innovation, they had only highlighted its importance. Now the entire defense establishment would be watching to see what she could accomplish with proper resources and support. The quiet woman with the faded laptop had just changed the future of warfare, one line of code at a time. 6 months later, Claire stood on the observation deck of the Pentagon's river entrance, watching the Potomac flow beneath the early morning mist. The building behind her hummed with the controlled chaos of the world's largest military bureaucracy, but she had learned to find moments of peace, even in the heart of the storm. Her phone buzzed with the familiar notification tone of secure military communications. The message was from General Stone. "Phantom lock cleared for operational deployment. All systems green. Congratulations. 6 months of intensive development." Security reviews and bureaucratic battles had culminated in this moment. Phantom lock was now integrated into the Air Force's primary air defense network, its algorithms running on classified servers in facilities she couldn't even name. The transformation had been remarkable. Their small consulting firm had grown from 12 employees to over 100, housed in a secure facility in Northern Virginia with the highest levels of security clearance. David had taken a leave of absence from his own work to help manage the expansion, bringing his expertise in defense contracting to bear on their sudden success. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that American pilots were safer because of her work. The first operational test had occurred 3 weeks ago during a joint exercise with NATO allies. F-35 Lightning Eyes equipped with Phantom lock integration had achieved a 90% intercept rate against simulated threats, a performance level that would have been impossible with conventional systems. Claire's reflection was interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Captain Reed, now Major Reed, approaching with an expression that mixed professional respect with personal embarrassment. "Ms. Dawson, I was hoping to catch you before the briefing." "Major Reed, congratulations on your promotion." He managed a rueful smile. "Thank you. Though I suspect my career advancement has more to do with learning to listen to good advice than with my own tactical brilliance." Claire studied his face, seeing genuine humility where once there had been arrogant dismissal. "Major, we all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." "That's generous of you, especially considering how I treated you during the Nevada exercise." He paused, clearly struggling with the words. "I owe you an apology. I let my pride override my professionalism, and it could have cost lives if this had been a real engagement." "Apology accepted. But I hope you understand that it was never personal. I was just trying to do my job." "Which you did brilliantly, despite our best efforts to stop you." Reed extended his hand. "I've been assigned to the operational integration team for Phantom Lock. I'm looking forward to working with you properly this time." As they shook hands, Claire felt a sense of closure. The same pilot who had dismissed her as a laptop lady was now eager to work with her technology. It was a transformation that had been repeated throughout the Air Force as word of Phantom Lock's capabilities spread. Dr. Chen's fate had been less pleasant. The cognitive shield program had been quietly terminated after a comprehensive review. Revealed fundamental flaws in its architecture. Chen herself had been reassigned to a research position with significantly reduced responsibilities. Claire felt no satisfaction in her former antagonist's downfall. Institutional failure helped no one. Colonel Hargrove had proven more adaptable. Initially resistant to change, he had eventually become one of Phantom Lock's strongest advocates after seeing its battlefield effectiveness. His experience with traditional systems provided valuable insights for integration, and his institutional knowledge helped navigate military bureaucracy. The morning briefing was held in a secure conference room deep within the Pentagon's E-Ring. The attendees represented the highest levels of American military leadership: generals, admirals, and civilian officials responsible for maintaining the nation's technological superiority. General Stone called the meeting to order with characteristic efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to discuss the next phase of predictive combat systems development. Ms. Dawson will brief us on Phantom Lock's operational performance and future capabilities. Claire activated the room's classified display system and began her presentation. The slides showed engagement statistics, threat assessment models, and capability projections that would have been science fiction just months earlier. Phantom Lock has demonstrated consistent performance advantages across all operational scenarios, she began. Average target acquisition time has decreased by 60%, while engagement accuracy has increased by 45%. More importantly, the system has shown the ability to adapt to new threat patterns in real time. The questions came quickly from officers who now understood the strategic implications of predictive warfare. They weren't challenging her competence. They were exploring the boundaries of the possible. Ms. Dawson, what are the limitations of current algorithms? Asked Admiral Rebecca Martinez, Director of Naval Intelligence. The primary limitation is data quality. Phantom Lock requires extensive behavioral samples to build accurate models. Against completely unknown aircraft or tactics, its effectiveness is reduced until it can learn new patterns. How long does the learning process take? Typically 15 to 20 minutes of observation for basic prediction capability. Full tactical modeling requires several hours of engagement data. General Stone leaned forward. What about countermeasures? Are there ways to defeat predictive algorithms? Claire nodded. Certainly. Random behavior patterns, AI-generated flight paths, and quantum uncertainty injection can all reduce prediction accuracy. But implementing such countermeasures requires sacrificing tactical efficiency. Meaning? An aircraft flying randomly to avoid prediction is also flying suboptimally for combat effectiveness. It's a trade-off between invisibility and capability. The briefing continued for 2 hours, covering technical details, operational procedures, and strategic implications. When it concluded, Claire felt the satisfaction of having educated the military leadership about the realities of modern warfare. As the room emptied, General Stone approached her with a final question. Ms. Dawson, looking ahead 5 years, where do you see this technology going? Claire considered the question carefully. General, we're approaching a fundamental shift in how warfare is conducted. Traditional concepts like stealth and surprise are being redefined by predictive algorithms. The military that adapts fastest to this new paradigm will have a decisive advantage. And you believe America can maintain that advantage? As long as we continue to innovate rather than simply defending existing capabilities. The moment we become complacent, we'll be overtaken by adversaries who are more willing to embrace change. Stone nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Later that evening, Claire stood in her new office overlooking the Potomac, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Her laptop The same battered machine that had started this journey sat open on her desk, displaying lines of code for the next generation of Phantom Lock. David appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of a man whose faith had been vindicated. "How does it feel to be the most important defense contractor in America?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Exhausting," Claire replied honestly. "6 months ago, I was worried about meeting payroll for 12 employees. Now, I'm responsible for technology that could determine the outcome of future conflicts. Any regrets?" Claire thought about the question seriously. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of 14-hour days, congressional hearings, security briefings, and constant pressure to deliver results. Her quiet life as an independent researcher was gone forever, replaced by the weight of national responsibility. "No," she said finally. "What we're doing matters. Every pilot who comes home safely, every engagement won without casualties, every conflict deterred by technological superiority, it's all worth the sacrifice." David smiled and raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To the woman who changed warfare with a laptop and an attitude." Claire clinked her cup against his. "To the future." Outside her window, the lights of Washington, D.C. began to twinkle in the gathering darkness. Somewhere in the Nevada desert, young pilots were training with systems that incorporated her algorithms. In classified facilities around the world, analysts were studying predictive warfare models that had originated in her small consulting firm. The mockery and dismissal she had faced seemed like ancient history now. Captain Reed's sneering comments about laptop ladies had been replaced by genuine professional respect. Colonel Hargrove's institutional resistance had evolved into enthusiastic advocacy. Dr. Chun's attempts at bureaucratic sabotage had only highlighted the superiority of innovative thinking over entrenched interests. But perhaps the most satisfying transformation was in herself. The quiet contractor who had sat alone among oil drums, ignored and dismissed by the military establishment, had grown into a confident leader comfortable wielding influence at the highest levels of government. Her phone buzzed with one final message of the day, this one from Lieutenant now Captain Daniels. "Ma'am, just completed first operational mission with Phantom Lock integration. Flawless performance. Thank you for giving us the edge we needed." Claire smiled and closed her laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new algorithms to develop, new frontiers to explore in the endless race between innovation and obsolescence. But tonight, she could rest in the knowledge that her work was making a difference in the world. The woman they had tried to silence had found her voice, and that voice was now shaping the future of warfare itself. It was, she reflected, a pretty good outcome for someone who just wanted to write better code. The revolution had begun with a single line of programming. Now it was changing everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.